story. The Mother Frost. There was once a widow who had two daughters, one of whom was beautiful and industrious and the other ugly and lazy. She behaved most kindly, however, to the ugly one, cruelly to the other, because she was her stepdaughter and made her do all the hard work and live like a kitchen maid. The poor maiden was forced out daily on her highroad and had to sit by the well and spin so much that blood ran from her fingers. Once it was happened that her spindles became quite covered with blood, so kneeling down by the well she tried to wash it off, but it fell down due to her misfortune. Her mother scolded her terribly and behaved very cruelly, and at last said, "Since you have let your spindle fall in, you must yourself fetch it out again." Then the maiden went back to the well, not knowing what to do, and, in her distress, she jumped into the well to fetch the spindle out. As she fell, she lost consciousness, and when she came to herself again, she found herself in a beautiful meadow where the sun was shining and many thousands of flowers blooming around her. She got up and walked along till she came to a baker's house where the oven was full of bread, which cried out, draw me, or I shall be burnt. I have been baked long enough." So she went up and, taking the bread pan, drew out one loaf after the other. Then she walked on further and came to an apple tree whose fruit hung very thick and which exclaimed, shake me, the apples are all ripe." So she shook the tree till the apples fell down like rain, and when none were left on, she gathered them all together in a heap and went further. At last she came to a cottage out of which an old woman was peeping, who had such very large teeth that the maiden was frightened and ran away. The old woman, however, called her back, saying, "What are you afraid of, my child? Stay with me. If you will put all things in order in my house, then shall all go well with you. Only you must take care that you make my bed well and shake it tremendously so that the feathers fly, then shows upon earth. I am old Mother Frost." As the old woman spoke so kindly, the maiden took courage and consented to engage herself in her service. Now, everything made her contented, and she always shook the bed so industriously that the feathers blew down like flakes of snow. Therefore her life was a happy one, and there were no evil words, and she roasted and baked many times every day. For some time she remained with the old woman, but, all at once, she became very sad and did not herself know what the matter was. At last she found she was homesick, and although she fared 1,000 times better than she did when she was at home, still she longed to go. So she told her mistress, "I wish to go home," and the mistress then said, "Since you have served me so truly, I will fetch you up again myself." So saying, she took her by the hand and led her before a great door which she undid, and when the maiden was just beneath it, a great shower of gold fell, and a great deal stuck to her so that she was covered over and over with gold. "That you must have for your industry," said the old woman, giving her the spindle which had fallen into the well. Thereupon the door was closed, and the maiden found herself upon the earth, not far from her mother's house, and as she came into the court, the cock sat upon the house and called, "Cock-a-doodle-doo! Our golden maids come home again." Then she went into her mother's house, and because she was so covered with gold, she was well received. The maiden related all that had happened, and when the mother heard how she had come by these great riches, she wished her ugly, lazy daughter to try her luck. So she was forced to sit down by the well and spin, and in order that her spindle might become bloody, She pricked her finger by running a thorn into it and then, throwing the spindle into the well, she jumped in after it. Story: The Old Woman on the Moon. Mona was a young girl who lived in Mumbai. One night she saw the full moon rise, climbing slowly across the sky. The moonlight was flooding her father's cornfields. It was so very beautiful that she praised God for all the wonderful things around her. For her the moon seemed to be at a far distance. She looked at the moon and felt that somebody was sitting in it under the shadow of a tree. She had heard there was an old woman who lived there. How lonely she must be, Mona thought for a while. She felt so sad to think of her. Suddenly a moonbeam danced right into her room and bowed low and said, "The old woman on the moon has read your thoughts and invites you for a visit. Won't you come with me? I shall bring you back in a few days." Mona's parents were away on a visit and only the old servant was in the house. She joyfully accepted the invitation and said, "But how shall I get there? The moon is miles away. I shall take you there. All you do is to touch this magic moon rays and sit on my back and by sunrise tomorrow we shall be to the moon." Quickly Mona touched the magic rays and away she flew with the dancing. They crossed oceans and continents and Mona, who knew her geography, saw the outline of the world laid away. Higher and higher he moonbeam ascended. Stars and planets swirled past. She was so excited that she urged the moonbeam to fly faster and faster. It was dark and the outline of the moon was clearly visible. The light grew brighter and brighter and Mona was almost blind by the shining glow. She could see deep valleys and craters and high mountains. She knew that no humans lived on the moon because there was no air and no living things grew there. She wondered how she would breathe and how the old woman lived. Doubtless, she had some magic powers. She knew that the glorious sun reflected its light on the moon. At last they reached the summit of a mountain and the exhausted moonbeam circled low and gently landed at the entrance of a beautiful castle made out of moonstones. Each gem glittered in every way and the enchantment of the scene fascinated the girl. A very old woman, her white flowing hair almost touching the ground, gently greeted the girl and bade her welcome. "You are the first human whom I have ever met. Are they all like you? I have watched the earth for millions of years. Tell me all you can about it. It is so lonely for me here. But how do you live here without air and water?" asked Mona. "My child, once you touch the magic moonstone, you need nothing. You can live here forever and not want anything." Mona was a gentle and kind girl and had great compassion for the old woman. Every day she sat with the old woman and told her stories of life on earth. She described the snow-capped mountains, the wide oceans, the green valleys, the bright meadows, the various beasts and the songs of the birds and the laughter of the children. But she sadly concluded that the earth was not all bliss as there was so much discord between different countries and much despair in the hearts of men. The old woman listened carefully and said that humans would soon reach the moon too. Already she had seen strange shapes circling the hills. Of course, those are the space capsules. They are piloted by men called astronauts and I know that one is actually going to land on the moon very soon. They don't need to touch the magic moonstone to survive here. They have oxygen tanks and all sorts of scientific instruments to help them. The next morning, Mona was exploring a crater, looking for pretty gems when she heard a strange whir and was astonished to see an unfamiliar contraption land bumpily near her. She knew it was some kind of a space capsule and gazed at the young astronaut with wonder. He in turn was so astonished to see a pretty young girl hopping among the craters that he nearly dropped his instruments. Who are you and how did you land here?
Story. The Poor Farmer. There was a small village wherein several rich farmers were settled and only one poor man who was therefore called the Poor Farmer. He had not even a goat, nor the money to buy any, though he and his wife would have been extremely happy to have one. One day he said to her, "A good thought has just struck me. The carver can make us a lamb out of wood and paint it brown so that it will look like any other. In time perhaps it will grow big and become a goat." This proposal pleased his wife, and the carver was instructed accordingly, and he cut out the lamb, painted it as it should be, and so made it that its head was bent down as if eating. The next morning the goats were driven out to pasture, and the farmer called the shepherd and said, "See, I have here a little lamb. But it is so small that it must as yet be carried." The shepherd said, "Very well," and taking it under his arm, carried it down to the meadow and set it among the grass. All day the lamb stood there as if eating. The shepherd said to himself, "See how it is eating. It will soon grow big and go alone." In the evening when he wanted to drive his flocks home, he said to the lamb, "If you can stand there to eat all the time, you must also be able to walk upon your 4 legs, and I shall not carry you home in my arms." The poor farmer stood before his house door waiting for his lamb. The shepherd drove his herd through the village. The farmer asked him about the lamb. The shepherd replied, "It is still standing there eating. It is not listening to me." The farmer exclaimed, "Eh? What? I must have my lamb." And so both of them went together down to the meadow. But someone had stolen the lamb and it was gone. The shepherd said, "Perhaps it has run away itself," but the farmer replied, "No, no, that won't do for me." The shepherd was dragged before the mayor. He was sentenced for his negligence to give the poor farmer a goat in the place of the lost lamb. Now the farmer and his wife possessed the long-desired goat and were very glad. But having no fodder, they could give her nothing to eat. So, very soon they were obliged to kill her. The flesh they salted down, and the skin the poor farmer took to the next town to sell and to buy a lamb with what he got for it. On the way he passed a mill where a raven was sitting with a broken wing, and out of compassion he took the bird up and wrapped it in the skin he was carrying. But the weather was very bad with a great storm and rain, so he was unable to go further, and turning into the mill, begged for shelter. The miller's wife was at home alone and said to the farmer, "Lie down on that straw," and gave him a piece of bread and cheese. The farmer ate it and lay down with the skin near him, and the miller's wife thought he was asleep. Later, a man came and she received him very cordially. She gave him a grand feast and the farmer was vexed on having been treated only with bread and cheese. The woman went inside the kitchen and brought well-fried chicken, rice and salad. As they were sitting down to eat, there was knock outside and the woman exclaimed, "Oh, gracious! That is my husband." In a great hurry she stuck the chicken in the oven, the salad under the pillow, the rice upon the bed, while her guest stepped into the cupboard where she kept the linen. After doing all this she let in her husband and said, "God be praised. You have returned again. What weather it is, as if the world is coming to an end." The miller noticed the man lying on the straw and asked what the fellow did there. His wife said, "Ah, the poor fellow came in the wind and rain and begged for shelter, so I gave him some bread and cheese and showed him the straw." The husband said he had no objection and asked her to bring some food for him. The wife said, "I have nothing but bread and cheese," and her husband told her with that he should be contented and asked the farmer to come and share his meal. The farmer did not let himself be